Yeah, I have a Ph.D. in philosophy from the University of Buffalo in New York. My research focus sometimes is on oppression, or within this area called phenomenology, the study of consciousness. I'm associate professor of philosophy at St. Mary's, as well as one of the co-directors of the new first year experience.
One of the things of developmental psychology came to mind, and when I was thinking about this, the idea of object permanence and representational thought. Piaget had done the cognitive development stages. He had discovered that children, when they reach a certain age, they realize that when a mom hides a toy behind her back, that it's still there. But before they reach that age, some would refer to as maybe a critical period. Um, Before the child reaches that age, when the mom puts the object behind her back, the child thinks the object has disappeared from all reality and existence. And they call it object permanence when the child finally realizes that no, it's not actually gone, it's still there, because the mind can map, I guess, an image of it, even though they can't see it.
I have a background in phenomenology, which is, again, the study of consciousness, or the structures of consciousness. This is one of those things that was really fascinating to watch my own kids go through those stages of development. One way we might think about this is to think about it as the ability to maintain a representation, to borrow the language you just used, or an understanding of an object in its absence. And that seems to be one of those critical pieces, at any rate, even if it's not the whole thing, of whatever it means when we say that we have object permanence. Whether we're talking about non-human animals, some social mammals can do this too, or humans, is that we learn the absence of the thing to our senses does not mean the absence of it from the world as such.
But then there's other stuff about children too, like the law of reversibility. Some children at a certain age don't realize that things can be reversed. They think that it's permanent. Some of them don't realize that when you have a glass this tall and this wide, it's the same liquid when you pour it from the tall glass into the short glass, but the child thinks the amount of the liquid has changed.
A lot of it is trying to figure out how our body interacts with the world, so that the embodied self has a lot to do with this. Just to amplify kind of what you were saying, Steele, is because a lot of those other conditions you're talking about are cases where someone's body has a different state of affairs. It's not a sighted body, or it's a body that has some other cognitive defect that's built into their neurology or something like this, and that affects that interaction between body and world in ways that create a different pattern of representations.
Because we perceive reality through our five senses, and yet people have different perceptions of reality and almost live in their own worlds. Yeah, it just makes you wonder what reality really is. And I know Rene Descartes, the philosopher, talked about that. He doubted reality. So
at the very least, what he was trying to do is figure out what he could or could not know about reality. And know here being a very technical term in philosophical jargon. So in everyday usage, we use the word know to be like, I'm pretty sure this is right, or something like this, right? It doesn't have much more weight than that. But when a philosopher uses the word know, what it sometimes means is something like, I've justified true belief, that I have good reasons for believing something that I happen to believe, and it's also true. And for Descartes, that's part of what he really worried about, is how can I know if anything is really true about the world out there? And he had an understanding of it as being out there. But he's like, I'm going to just, for once in my life, kind of submit everything to radical doubt and put it all in brackets and put it on a shelf, and I don't get it back unless I have strong justification. So note he's putting the accent on that. I have good reasons, reliable reasons for thinking something is true. And unless I can pass that hurdle, I can't make a judgment that something is real or not, is kind of where he starts.
He talked about dreams and how do we know if we're not still in a dream? So, yeah.
Right. Yeah. So as he walks through this process of radical doubt, what he's doing is he's kind of clustering different kinds of justification he might have. So the first thing he does is he assaults the senses. He says, my senses can sometimes be deceived. And he goes, okay, so then I have a reason to doubt the senses, so I can take all sensory stuff. But along the way, he goes, well, that might be too hasty. Right. And this is a step that I think a lot of people miss when they read it. Maybe the senses are only deceived under certain conditions or constraints. But he says, and this is why he thinks about dreams. I can experience a dream in which I don't know if I'm awake or not. And I can experience a dream where I think I've woken up, but it turns out I'm still dreaming. And so there's a more systematic way in which all of that sensory information could possibly be misguided. And there's yet other thought experiments he raises as well, but just for turning to the dream argument, that's the big key. And it's that principle there that really is driving that argument, which is there doesn't appear to be any principled basis on which we can distinguish between dreaming states and waking states. There's just, because they can always be, the mind can always kind of be duped in that regard, or can be misguided or mistaken.
Because we never know when we're dreaming, when we're in a dream, I think is what we're getting at here. But what do you think about dreams within dreams, not knowing if we're ever really awake?
That's pretty cool, because I know you still have experimented a little bit more with, trying to control your dreams.
Lucid dreaming.
Yeah, lucid dreaming.
I can tell you right now, I've had some really realistic ones, and they seem real. Even when I'm in them, it's insane how detailed.
Yeah, and those are one of those phenomena that Descartes is clearly aware of. He understands this is something that happens to some people. And even if it doesn't happen to everyone, it's like, how do I know that I'm not one of those candidates, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We can be fooled in thinking something else is the actual reality when, maybe it's not. We continue to spend more time in the screens and then later into virtual reality, then which reality is the one we consider to be real, the one where we spent the most time, or the one where we actually live in?
Part of what Descartes helped us do is to crystallize the question clearly enough in a way where we can kind of understand a little better, or we can figure out a little better what aren't good answers from what are good answers. This is one of the ways that philosophy makes progress, is sometimes we just happen to have a breakthrough where we can throw a whole bunch of stuff out now, or new things come back into play. I think a lot of what it is going to come down to is, what do we think is a world, or what do we think we mean when we use the term reality? Are we referring to something that's objectively accessible to anybody in principle, or does it have other constraints on it?
Meaning changes our perceptions of reality, and I know that studying psychology and cognitive appraisals, cognitive distortions, cognitive behavioral therapy is all about looking at people's dysfunctional perceptions of reality. Like I might see, like one brother could see the father as a positive role model, the other brother might see him as a hateful monster.
Yeah, again, if we think that what we mean by referring to reality tested meanings, then it kind of doesn't matter that we're talking about the objective collection of stuff. So those virtual worlds can actually be kind of more real to us in one way of thinking about what it means to call something real than not. Now, if we mean by real, it's got to be mind independently true, right? It's just out there, even if we're not here, then it seems like maybe what we're talking about are two different things sometimes. Is one is the set of meanings, right, through which we filter our perceptions and our judgments, and one is, the stuff, but we can't know the stuff independent of our judgments and our perceptions of them. So we're sort of limited there in terms of how much and how we go about gathering our knowledge. So
do you think reality is an illusion, or is there some objective, matter or truth, whatever you want to call it, to it?
So that's a very good question. I don't honestly don't know, because I think it's going to come down to what we have to say. I think